He gave her the ring. While I was sick and calling his name, he was smiling beside her, proposed her. Like I never existed. I didn't fight. They thought I'd break. But some stories don't end in heartbreak. Some begin there. And what comes next? You say. They won't see it coming. There are a lot of things I've been called in my life. Overly analytical, emotionally intense, maybe a little dramatic. But one thing I've never been accused of? Being wrong when my gut speaks. And that morning my gut was screaming. I was home alone, which was rare these days. Mason had left early, muttering something about a last-minute client meeting. He didn't kiss me goodbye, not even a distracted peck on the cheek like he used to. Just grabbed his keys, phone, and that stupid silver pen he always insisted was lucky, and walked out the door. I sat at the kitchen island with a lukewarm mug of coffee and 3 unread texts from him still open on my phone. Did you send the deck to Julie? Tell Henry to move the meeting to Friday. No onions in dinner tonight. Important lunch tomorrow. Romantic, right? The man had once written me a handwritten note that said, "You make the rain feel like jazz." Now he texted like a manager with a personal assistant he didn't quite respect. I sipped the coffee, wincing. Bitter. Burnt. Which, if I'm being honest, was also an accurate description of my mood. Mason and I had been together for 5 years. We met when I was a junior associate at Blake & Associates, back when I still thought work was temporary and love was permanent. He was already a rising star, smart, sharp, handsome in that effortless, expensive way. He smelled like confidence and wore his ambition like a second suit. And I was the girl with the color-coded tabs, the neat handwriting, and a closet full of clearance heels pretending not to care what people thought. But he noticed me. Chose me. At least that's what I believed back then. I headed into his home office with the intent to grab a USB drive. Nothing dramatic. Nothing snoopy. Just the usual chore. His assistant had left files in the drawer and I needed them for the quarterly review. But the drawer was locked. Interesting. Mason never locked drawers. He locked emotions, sure. Locked conversations and eye contact and commitment, definitely. But drawers. Not his style. I stared at it for a moment. Then, without thinking too hard, I tugged open the bottom file cabinet, where he kept spare keys and backup chargers and a half-melted protein bar. There it was, the tiny bronze key. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just retrieving a file. Maybe some trust too while I was at it. The key clicked, smooth and sharp, and the drawer slid open like it had been waiting for me. And sitting there dead center was a velvet box. I froze. It was white, square, delicate. A ring box. A very expensive-looking ring box. I didn't touch it at first. I just stared like it was a bomb and I wasn't sure whether it would detonate or save me. Then slowly, carefully I lifted the lid. My breath caught. It was stunning. A pear-shaped diamond, slender platinum band with a twist detail, the kind of ring that says, "I've known what I wanted all along." Elegant. Timeless. Exactly the design I'd pointed out a year ago when we walked past a Cartier window. I'd said something like, "How that's a ring." Simple, clean, confident. And he had shrugged and muttered, "Too predictable." But here it was. The exact ring. I stared at it, waiting for my heart to explode or implode or do something other than sit in my chest like it had stage fright. I should have felt joy, elation, triumph. But what I actually felt was hesitation. Because none of it made sense. Why buy the ring I liked after dismissing it? Why hide it in a locked drawer and not say a word? Why act cold, distracted, distant if he was planning something so intimate? And yet, Hope, the ever-persistent idiot, climbed out of her grave and sat right down beside me. I closed the box carefully, placing it back exactly where I found it. I locked the drawer again. Put the key back. Like a girl afraid of jinxing a wish. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Mason had always loved theatrics. In boardrooms, on birthdays, during makeups, after fights. Maybe he'd been waiting for the right time. Maybe the late nights, the distance, the excuses. Maybe it was nerves. Yes. That had to be it. This was the calm before the proposal. I'd seen it in movies, hadn't I? The aloof boyfriend, the confused girlfriend, the twist that ties everything in a bow. Except Mason wasn't a movie. And I wasn't a character who got a soundtrack swell when the ring appears. Still, I clung to the thought like a lifeline. Or maybe a lifeboat. Because if this wasn't leading to a proposal, well then I'd have to start asking questions I already knew the answers to. That evening I dressed a little nicer than usual. Not like, I'm expecting a ring, nice. More like, just happen to wear this effortlessly beautiful blouse that shows off my collarbones and ambition, nice. Mason came home after 9 p.m. No flowers. No mystery. Just his usual brisk walk and distracted kiss on the cheek, the kind that doesn't quite touch your skin. Dinner? I asked casually. Already ate, he replied, loosening his tie and tossing it on the back of the couch. Long day. Right? I said, smoothing invisible wrinkles on my skirt. Tuesdays do tend to surprise us like that. He didn't catch the sarcasm. Or maybe he did and chose not to engage. I followed him into the kitchen. So, anything exciting coming up? He opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water. Not really. Why? I smiled. Just wondering if I should keep next weekend open. You know, in case of surprises. He turned, narrowing his eyes slightly. Are you fishing for something? Nope, I said sweetly. Just being an overthinking, overly romantic, prematurely curious woman. You know, the usual. Mason gave a short laugh. You're impossible. And then he walked past me, not even noticing the way my hands were clenched into fists by my sides. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to decide if I was delusional or just desperate. He was acting strange, yes. Distant. Cold. But wasn't that part of the process? The stress before the proposal? The planning? The ring was there. I saw it. You don't buy a ring like that if you don't intend to use it. Unless you bought it for someone else. I shut that thought down so hard and fast I practically gave myself whiplash. Oh, that was me being dramatic. Jealous. Crazy. Words he'd used before when I asked about his long lunches with Vanessa. When I mentioned how she still sent him playlists or tagged him in Instagram stories with just friends and heart emojis. He was his past, he said. I was his future. And now the ring was proof. Wasn't it? I woke up early the next morning, eyes gritty from lack of sleep, chest tight from dreams I couldn't remember. I padded into the kitchen and made coffee, still tasting last night's tension. The ring haunted me. But in a hopeful way. Like a ghost that didn't want to scare me, just remind me it was still there. By the time Mason came into the kitchen freshly showered and pulling on his cufflinks, I was practically humming with nervous energy. He paused when he saw me. You're up early. I smiled. Couldn't sleep. Too much coffee? I shrugged. Too many thoughts. He didn't ask what they were. As he left, he paused by the door, his hand on the knob. For a second I thought, this is it. He's going to say something. Do something. Maybe drop to one knee and make this stupid, painful limbo finally end. But he just said, don't forget to send that email to Julia. She's been waiting. And then he was gone. I stood there alone, mug in hand, heart in limbo. But I held on to hope. Because the ring was still in the drawer. Because I'd seen it. Because it had to mean something. Didn't it? The body has a funny way of warning you when everything's about to go to hell. Mine started with a quiet rebellion. A sour twist in my stomach around noon. I blamed the leftover mushroom risotto. Or maybe the vending machine protein bar I'd eaten at my desk. Either way, I wasn't concerned. By 2 p.m. I was hugging the toilet and trying to breathe through waves of nausea that felt like someone had tied a bungee cord to my intestines and kept yanking. I was supposed to be reviewing slides for Friday's client pitch. But my laptop sat untouched on the coffee table, glowing faintly while I curled up in a fetal position on the bathroom floor, cheek pressed to the cool tile. Sweat soaked through my shirt and my hair clung to my face in limp strands. I was shaking. I knew it. But I kept thinking if I just gave it an hour I'd feel better. Spoiler, I didn't. At 3:45 I reached for my phone. Mason, I don't feel good. I think I have food poisoning. Can you come home early? Please. I really need you. I waited. No reply. I threw up again. This time there was nothing left but bile and shame. I don't know if you've ever had violent food poisoning, but let me tell you, it doesn't feel romantic. I spent most of that night on the bathroom floor, alternating between crying and dry heaving. At one point I actually Googled, "Can you die from throwing up too much?" before vomiting on my phone case. I called Mason 3 times. Then 4. By the 5th I wasn't even expecting him to answer. I just needed to hear the voicemail to remember what his voice sounded like when he wasn't being a corporate robot. On the 6th try he picked up. "What?" he snapped. "Mason," my voice cracked. "I don't feel well. I think I need to go to the hospital." There was a long pause. I could hear muffled music and people laughing in the background. "You're being dramatic again," he said. "Can't this wait till tomorrow?" And just like that I stopped shaking. My hands stilled. My nausea didn't. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it like it had insulted me personally. Then I pressed the red button. Call ended. I lay on the floor, trembling, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if answers might be carved into the paint. Then came the notification. Vanessa Lynn just posted a photo. Tagged, Mason Blake. Caption, he asked. I said yes, ring happy birthday to me. Oh, no. I unlocked the screen with shaking hands. Tapped the notification with a finger that could barely feel anything. There was Vanessa, radiant in some glitter-drenched cocktail dress, eyes glistening with crocodile tears, her hand stretched forward like she was crowning herself queen of the universe. On her finger was a ring. My ring. The ring I'd found in his drawer. The ring I convinced myself was mine. And behind her, Mason. Smiling. Confident. Alive in a way he hadn't looked with me in months. The caption burned. He asked. I said yes. He asked. Not me. Her. He gave her the ring. On her birthday. The same night I was calling him from my bathroom floor, begging for help, covered in sweat and bile. I didn't cry. There was no time. My body convulsed again and I barely made it to the sink in time. Whatever was left inside me, grief, pride, hope, it all came pouring out. After a while the world went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Hollow quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a vacuum. No sound, no air, just the deafening roar of nothing. I forced myself to my feet. I don't remember exactly how. I just knew I had to get out. Out of this apartment. Out of the memory of him. Out of my own head. I pulled on the first hoodie I could find, something oversized and gray. Slipped on mismatched flats I couldn't see clearly. My vision was spotty, like a cloud had crept into the corners of my eyes. I gripped the wall as I walked down the hallway, knees wobbling with every step. I could make it to the hospital. I just had to move. Each step to the door felt like wading through syrup. My hands were numb. The hallway tilted like I was walking on a ship in a storm. I reached for the doorknob. And then, darkness. The floor rose to meet me. I collapsed with a thud, the cool air of the corridor brushing against my cheek as the world blinked out around me. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was beige. Beige ceiling. Beige walls. Beige curtains. Even the light had a clinical washed-out beige hue, like the world had been dipped in bland. Then came the smell, antiseptic and latex, the unmistakable scent of hospitals and heartbreak. I blinked slowly, trying to piece together how I'd gone from my hallway floor to here. My mouth felt like sandpaper. My head throbbed in time with the monitor beeping beside me. Hey, a voice said softly just above a whisper. She's back. I turned my head, too fast, and immediately regretted it. My stomach flipped, but I managed to keep everything where it belonged. Sitting beside my bed in a scuffed-up hoodie and jeans, hair slightly disheveled, was Noah Bennett. My neighbor. The quiet guy from 5B who always held the elevator without asking. The one who once helped me carry an entire grocery haul and said nothing except, "You and 10 watermelons okay in there?" He was here. But how long? I croaked, my throat barely cooperating. "Almost 18 hours, he said, sitting up straighter. "You scared the crap out of me, you know. 1 minute I'm watering my succulents. Yes, I have succulents, don't judge. And the next I'm finding you unconscious in the hallway." I blinked again. "You found me." He nodded. "Keys still in your hand. Face pale. Shoes mismatched, which honestly might have been the most offensive part." I managed a weak chuckle. I was in a rush. Yeah, to collapse like a Victorian lady in a corset? Nailed it. Despite the pounding in my skull and the ache in my limbs, I smiled. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "They said it was severe dehydration and food poisoning. You weren't just sick. You were about an hour away from a very different kind of wake-up call." I looked away. I didn't know what else to do. "Most people would have called an ambulance," he said. "You tried to walk to the hospital in bedroom slippers. That's impressively stubborn. You're not wrong." I expected him to laugh again, maybe make another quip. Instead, his voice softened. "You should have called someone." I didn't answer. Because the only person I had called had accused me of acting again and hung up. Noah watched me, his gaze steady. Not prying. Just present. I cleared my throat, trying to change the subject. How did I end up here? Did you? Fireman carried you, he said proudly. Well, more like awkward cradled. I didn't want to drop you and I wasn't sure if you were the fragile bird type. You carried me? Don't look so shocked. I go to the gym. I raised an eyebrow. To watch or to lift? Rude. I'll have you know these arms have carried at least 2 couches and 1 very dramatic ex-girlfriend. Ah, I said. So I'm in distinguished company. The most distinguished, he said, bowing his head slightly. There was a pause. Not awkward exactly, just still. I told the nurse I was your boyfriend, he added casually. My brain short-circuited. You what? He shrugged. They wouldn't let me sign anything without a relative, and you looked like death's understudy. It was either that or let them bill you as Jane Doe and send you to the ward with no windows. You lied to the hospital. Technically, I just omitted certain facts. I stared at him. He stared back, utterly unbothered. Are you always this dramatic? I asked. Only for unconscious women and stray cats, he replied. Damn it, I laughed. Later, after a nurse came in and fussed over my vitals, I settled deeper into the thin hospital blanket. Noah was still there, scrolling through his phone like sitting in a bland room with a half-dead neighbor was the most natural thing in the world. Why are you still here? I asked. He didn't look up. Figured you'd need someone to threaten the Jell-O tray guy. I gave him a look. He sighed and set his phone down. Because you didn't look like someone who had anyone else coming. There was the truth. Sharp and clean, delivered without pity. I looked away. You didn't have to. I know, he said. That's why I did. We sat in silence again. This one felt different. Not the heavy, hopeless kind I'd been carrying with Mason, but something lighter. Softer. You don't even know me, I murmured. Sure I do, Noah replied. You're Ivy. You live next door. You listen to jazz when you clean. You water your plants on Sunday afternoons and talk to them when you think no one's listening. You hum when you're in the elevator alone. And you once made a 10-year-old cry at Halloween because he said your costume wasn't scary enough, and you told him to wait till life hits you. My eyes widened. You remember that? You wore fake blood and a pencil skirt, he said. It was iconic. A soft laugh escaped me before I could help it. Okay, maybe you do know me. He smiled. The sun was starting to set outside. The light filtering through the blinds was soft and orange, casting shadows across Noah's face. My phone buzzed on the tray beside me. I reached for it, heart stuttering for a stupid half-second. Maybe Mason had finally noticed I was missing. Maybe he'd panicked. Maybe he'd come looking. But no. It was a generic calendar reminder about dry cleaning. No calls. No messages. No missed anything. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd sent a cruel text. Because this silence wasn't sharp. It was indifferent. And indifference, I was learning, was worse than hatred. Noah must have seen something in my face because he asked, boyfriend? I hesitated. I said. As of now. He didn't push. Didn't ask for details or try to fix it. He just nodded. Then he's an idiot. I stared at him. Anyone who leaves you like that? He added, voice firm. Idiot. Certified. I smiled. You don't even know what he did. Don't need to, Noah said. I saw you lying in that hallway and I knew nobody should ever have to be that alone. And for a moment I almost cried. But instead I reached for the water cup and took a long sip. So, I said, steadying my voice, you gonna keep pretending to be my boyfriend for the hospital discounts or what? Absolutely, he said, grinning. And I demand full privileges. First dibs on pudding cups. Power to veto visitors. And joint custody of the remote. You're pushing your luck. Too late. I'm already picking the Netflix show for your discharge night. I rolled my eyes, but my heart, bruised and tired, softened just a little. Because maybe the man I thought would save me was gone. But the one who had. He was sitting right beside me. And he never asked for anything in return. When I stepped back into my apartment, the silence hit differently. Before, it had been the kind of silence I filled with waiting. Waiting for Mason to come home, waiting for the sound of his keys, the click of his dress shoes, the hollow apologies wrapped in charm. But now it was just mine. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to, clutching the hospital's plastic discharge folder, still wearing the same hoodie from 3 days ago. My plants drooped by the windowsill. A stale takeout container sat on the kitchen counter. The coffee mug I'd used the morning I found the ring was still in the sink, dried circles of brown staining the bottom. It was exactly as I left it. And completely unrecognizable. I shuffled inside, dropped the folder on the table and sat down on the couch. My body was still weak, every joint protesting, every muscle reminding me it hadn't recovered, but I needed to be here. In my space. Alone. Or at least I thought I did. Exactly 22 minutes later there was a knock. Not the aggressive, urgent kind. Just a knock, 2 short taps. Familiar. I opened the door slowly. There stood Noah Bennett holding a paper bag in one hand and a plastic container in the other. His expression was casual, but his eyes immediately scanned my face, like he was checking for color or signs I might drop again. "You look slightly less like death," he said. "We love to see growth." "Is that soup?" I asked. He lifted the bag. "Two kinds. One's got noodles. One's got things I can't pronounce. You get both." "And what's the catch?" "No catch," he said. "Just a man and his borderline unhealthy coping mechanism. Feeding people." I opened the door wider. "Come in, I guess." He made himself at home like he'd done it before. Set the soup on the counter, took off his shoes, grabbed 2 bowls from my cabinet like he'd memorized the layout. "You break into my kitchen often?" I asked, amused. "Only during emergencies. And on Tuesdays." "It's Thursday." "Exactly. Big emergency." I sat at the counter and watched him pour the soup like it was a sacred ritual. He moved with a kind of comfortable rhythm, the opposite of Mason, who'd fumble with kitchen tools like they were foreign objects or make a mess he'd never clean. "Did you even go home?" I asked. "I did," he said. "Long enough to shower and make myself presentable. Not that you'd notice, you've been asleep for almost a full day. Hospital beds aren't exactly restful." He slid a bowl in front of me and leaned against the counter. "This one has ginger and garlic. Supposed to help with your stomach." "Let me guess, you Googled it." "Excuse you, I texted my aunt." Which is basically the same as asking the internet, but with more emotional blackmail. I took a bite. The warmth hit instantly, spreading through my chest like something unwinding. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that first spoonful. Noah didn't say anything. He just watched me eat like it was a small victory. Like me surviving another day meant something. It felt odd. Not uncomfortable. Just new. Mason had never cooked for me. He didn't even know where I kept the silverware. After dinner I tried to insist on doing the dishes. Noah physically blocked the sink with his entire body like a human barricade. "You just got out of the hospital." "I'm fine." "You fainted on tile." I bounced back fast. "Great. Then you'll bounce right off your feet again while I'm not looking. Sit." I glared at him. He folded his arms. And I sat. Stubborn. Infuriating. Completely unfair. I was used to being the caretaker, the one who remembered the laundry, the calendar, the blood type. I didn't know how to let someone else show up. So why was he making it feel easy? He stayed until I was visibly sleepy, then stood and stretched. "You'll be okay tonight?" he asked, lingering by the door. I nodded. "I think so." "Cool." He paused. "I'll check in tomorrow. Bring real food this time. Maybe something that won't try to assassinate your stomach. No more soup. Only if you beg." I smiled. He gave me a lazy salute and slipped out the door. The quiet returned, but it wasn't as empty now. It felt more like a pause than a void. I stood at the window for a while after he left, staring at the city lights and wondering how someone who barely knew me had shown up more in 3 days than Mason had in 3 years. Speaking of, I checked my phone again. No texts. No calls. Not even a, "Hey, are you alive?" That hurt more than the vomiting. The next morning my fever was gone, but the ache in my chest remained. Noah didn't knock until noon. This time he brought dumplings and Gatorade. "You're not gonna faint if you eat too much ginger, right?" he teased. "No promises." We sat on the floor with pillows and an open container of soy sauce between us. He told me about a failed startup he once invested in. Something about dog-themed NFTs which I didn't fully understand but laughed at anyway. I told him about the time I tried to dye my hair strawberry blonde and ended up with pumpkin orange. By the third dumpling I realized I was leaning toward him without meaning to. Not romantically, Just emotionally. Like I was slowly recalibrating the part of myself that had been taught love was something you earned by being useful. With Noah, I didn't have to be anything. I just had to be. On Sunday, he helped me sort through mail and canceled delivery services Mason had signed us up for. One of the month. Beard oil subscription. A meditation app neither of us ever opened. Do you want to keep any of this? Noah asked. No. Not even the artisanal coffee box? He never drank it. Just liked how it looked on the counter. Noah raised an eyebrow. Aesthetics over authenticity. I nodded. He didn't say Mason was the worst, but it hung in the air between us like an unspoken agreement. And for once I didn't feel the need to defend the man who disappeared the moment I needed him. On Monday I received flowers. White roses. No card. I didn't need one. Mason always sent white roses when he screwed up. The I didn't mean it bouquet. The I got caught but I'm still not admitting anything arrangement. I stared at them for a long time. Then I picked them up, walked straight to the trash and dropped them in. Noah, who was mid-reach into my snack cabinet, glanced over. Yikes. Harsh. Therapeutic, I replied. He grinned. I like this version of you. So do I. That night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie we both pretended to hate, I caught myself glancing at him. Noticing things. The way he rested his ankle on his knee. The way he squinted slightly when reading subtitles. The way he always angled himself toward me like he was listening even when no one was talking. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just existed in it with me. And that somehow felt like the loudest kind of care. We were folding laundry. While I was folding, Noah was mostly critiquing. Who folds socks like this? He asked, holding one of mine like it had personally offended him. People who don't want to spend 10 minutes untangling sock spaghetti, I replied, snatching it from his hand. You're crushing their soul. Their socks. They don't have souls. Noah looked scandalized. Spoken like someone who's never owned good wool. I rolled my eyes and tossed a towel at him. It hit him square in the chest, and instead of defending himself like a normal adult, he dramatically fell back onto the couch, arms sprawled as if the towel had knocked the life out of him. Ivy Morgan, he gasped, you are truly ruthless. I grinned. And yet you keep coming back. Clearly I have issues. He sat back up, laughing, and reached for the pile of clothes again. As he stretched, his shirt lifted just a bit. And I froze. For a fraction of a second I didn't know what I was seeing. Then I did. A jagged, faded scar, curved and branching like a tree root, stretched along the left side of his ribs, disappearing beneath the fabric again as he moved. It wasn't the kind of mark you forget. Because I hadn't. Because I'd seen it once before, years ago in flickering shadows and smoke. My hands stilled on the fabric in my lap. The room tilted. I was no longer in my apartment. I was 8 years old. The fire had started after lights out. I remembered the smoke first, thick and choking, curling through the hallway of the orphanage like it had a mind of its own. I'd woken to the crackling sound, the heat pressing against my small bed. The door had already been hot to the touch when I tried to open it. I'd screamed for help, pounded on the walls, the floor, anything. And then, through the haze, a boy. He couldn't have been older than 10. Wild eyes. A split lip. Covered in ash. He kicked the door open, grabbed my arm and pulled me out. His hand never let go, not even as the ceiling started to groan and crumble. I remembered the scar on his side. Burned red, angry. I remembered thinking he's going to die trying to save me. But he didn't. He got me out. And then, just like that, he was gone. I never saw him again. Now 2 decades later I was looking at that same scar. Same shape. Same side. Same silence. Noah was rambling about something. I wasn't listening. I reached out without thinking and gently touched his side. He startled, looked down, then at me. I didn't say anything. Just stared. His expression shifted, playfulness fading into something still and cautious. Where'd you get this? I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. I met his eyes. Tell me the truth. Noah looked away. For a second I thought he might deflect, make a joke, toss another towel. But instead he let out a slow breath and sat back against the couch. House fire, he said. When I was 10. Foster home. Middle of the night. My chest squeezed. You pulled a girl out. From a room upstairs. She was 8. He didn't move. Didn't blink. I whispered. Her name was Ivy. Noah's eyes finally met mine. And I saw it. Recognition. I remember, he said quietly. She wouldn't stop crying. Held on to me like a koala. I wasn't crying, I lied, voice cracking. He gave a small smile. You were absolutely crying. I let out a shaky laugh. You saved me. He shrugged like it was nothing. I just happened to be the one who didn't freeze. You were a kid. So were you. I stared at him. All this time, the boy I thought I'd imagined, the one I thought I'd never see again, he'd been living one door down. Bringing me soup. Arguing about sock folds. I used to wonder, I said softly, if you were real. If I'd made you up. You didn't. Why didn't you ever say anything? He looked down at his hands. Didn't recognize you at first. It was a long time ago. And you had someone. Maybe. I flinched at the name I didn't say aloud. I figured, he continued, if you needed to remember you would. I wasn't going to push. I was quiet for a long time. Then, your name. Noah's not your real name, is it? He hesitated. Then slowly he said, it was Samuel. But everyone called me Sam. I closed my eyes. It all clicked. The voice. The way he never flinched when I was quiet. The way he knew how to show up without making it about him. Noah Bennett was Sam. The boy who saved me once and never asked to be thanked. Now here he was, again, in a different city, a different life, showing up when no one else did. Do you believe in fate? I asked suddenly. He tilted his head. Is that your way of saying I owe you another soup? I smiled. Because I've got this killer chicken tortilla recipe. Noah, I said, cutting him off. You saved me. Twice. He looked at me long and quiet. Then, maybe I was just where I was supposed to be. And I didn't have anything clever to say back. That night after he left, promising more food and less emotional whiplash tomorrow, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. My entire life I'd been trying to prove I was worth showing up for. Worth staying for. I thought love had to be earned, with patience, with compromise, with quiet sacrifice. But Sam, Noah, had never asked for any of that. He just came back. And stayed. And somehow, without ever saying the words, told me exactly what I needed to hear. You were never hard to love. By the third day of silence I stopped checking my phone. Which is saying a lot for someone who used to keep her ringer on during showers. Just in case Mason needed something. I deleted his name from my favorites. Then from my speed dial. Then finally from my contacts. Just unknown, now. Fitting, considering I didn't know the man who'd let me collapse in a hallway while he proposed to someone else with the ring I thought was mine. The apartment was quiet, but not the same kind of silence that used to eat me alive. This one was earned. It smelled like lemon and fresh sheets. It moved with sunlight on the floors and soup simmering on the stove. Noah had dropped off a container earlier with a note taped to the lid that read, "No fire escapes necessary today. Rest easy. Sam." Every time I said it, even in my head, my chest tightened. Not in pain but in recognition. A tether finally found again. He'd saved me. And I wasn't planning on wasting that kind of grace. I was slicing carrots when my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown calling. I stared at it for a full ring cycle, knife still in hand. Second cycle. I exhaled. Third cycle. I answered. Hello. I said, voice flat. There was a pause. Then, Ivy. Maybe. Of course. I was wondering if you planned on reaching out, he continued, tone clipped, annoyed like I was the one who'd gone MIA. I was in the hospital, I said simply. What? Food poisoning. I passed out in the hallway. My neighbor found me. Took me in. Pause. Then a scoff. Well, if you hadn't cut me off completely, maybe I would have known that. You hung up on me, Mason, I said, turning the burner off. When I told you I was sick, you said I was acting again. That's not what I meant. You were always so emotional. Don't, I said sharply. Don't reduce what happened to me because it's easier for your ego. You should have communicated better. I did, I snapped. I texted you. I called you. I begged. And you hung up because you were too busy slipping a ring onto Vanessa's hand. Silence. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. You know what's wild? I found the ring in your drawer and thought it was for me. I was happy, Mason. Sick as I was, I actually smiled. Still no response. I didn't need one. That's the part that kills me, I went on, voice low now. Not that you cheated. Not even that you lied. But that I let myself believe, for even 1 second, that you were thinking about me. When the truth is, you stopped seeing me months ago. He finally spoke, defensive. I didn't stop seeing you. Then what was I to you? I asked, calm now, surgical. A placeholder? A support beam while you rebuilt your confidence? Someone to come home to until the glitter came back into your life. You're being unfair. No. I'm being honest, I said. Something you never had the courage to be. He was quiet again. I could hear faint sounds in the background, the shuffle of papers, a door closing. I imagined him in his office or maybe Vanessa's condo, wearing a crisp shirt, not a wrinkle out of place. Everything neat and hollow. You don't get to call now and act like I owe you an explanation, I said. You had your chance to show up. You didn't. And that silence said everything. Ivy. No, I cut in. You don't get to call me like I'm still yours. I'm not. Then I hung up. No slam. No drama. Just click and peace. I stood there for a long time staring at the blank screen. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. In fact, I felt good. Like I just vacuumed my soul. The moment passed and I turned back to the counter. I stood outside Noah's house holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a hand-stitched leather journal I'd picked up from a local artisan shop. It was simple, clean pages, no branding, no label, just like him. I didn't know if he wrote. I just wanted to give him something that felt honest. It wasn't repayment. It was a thank you. For the soup. For the silence. For staying. I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before I could. It was Miriam, his elderly housekeeper, with her gray hair pinned into a neat coil, and a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Ivy dear, she greeted warmly. You're here for him? I held up the box. Just wanted to drop this off. Is he around? He's upstairs, in a meeting, she said. Won't be down for another half hour at least. But come in. I'll make tea. I hesitated. I don't want to intrude. Oh hush. The man practically glows when he talks about you. I blinked. He talks about me? Miriam winked and shuffled toward the kitchen. Go on up. Leave your gift in his room if you'd like. He keeps forgetting to decorate. Could use something warm in there. His room. She turned back. He won't mind. Doors open. I hesitated, but curiosity, or something quieter and deeper, nudged me forward. Upstairs, the hallway was lined with sketches tacked directly to the wall. Architectural pencil renderings, museum layouts, even the skeletal blueprint of a fire escape. Noah's world laid out in graphite and ink. His bedroom was plain but intentional. Clean walls, floor-to-ceiling shelves. Books arranged by language, not color. Practical, not performative. A dark navy comforter. A half-read paperback on the nightstand. I placed the box on the desk. Just as I turned to leave, something on the shelf caught my eye. A thin file, aged, the corner curling slightly. There wasn't a label. Just a worn paperclip holding its contents together. I should have walked away. But something made me reach for it. Something heavier than instinct. Something like truth. The file opened with a soft crack. Inside, scanned school transcripts, award notifications, receipts. Scholarships I'd won. Grants I never remembered applying for. All with the same footnote. Yes, educational trust. I flipped further. Letters. Signed donation slips. Tax filings. Every anonymous deposit, from my middle school fees to my university bursar account, carried the same source. Elijah Samuels. Noah's full name. I stumbled back, clutching the folder. It couldn't be. But it was. Oh, Sam had paid for everything. Quietly. Completely. For years. I went downstairs without remembering how my feet moved. Miriam handed me a mug of tea. I barely noticed. Something wrong, dear? I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice cracked. She nodded slowly. Oh. So you found it. You knew. Her eyes softened. Of course. I helped him sort the papers. He wanted you to have a fair chance. Said the world owed you more than it gave. Why didn't he tell me? Because, she said, placing a hand over mine, he didn't do it to be seen. I waited. 20 minutes later I heard the stairs creak. Noah entered the kitchen rubbing the back of his neck, clearly tired. When he saw my face he froze. Ivy? I held up the folder. Why didn't you tell me? He didn't answer. From middle school, I continued. Every donation. Every scholarship. All of it, you. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. You think I'd feel owed? I asked, blinking back heat in my eyes. Noah, that was my life. You gave me a life. I just gave you space, he said quietly. You did the rest. I set the folder on the counter and stepped closer. I thought I got lucky. That somehow after everything the world had finally cut me a break. You deserved more than luck. I laughed, short, bitter. And all this time I was chasing someone who never even looked back. I looked up at him. While you were always behind me. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. And in that breath of silence I crossed the distance and kissed him. It wasn't a firestorm. It wasn't urgent. It was gravity. The kind of pull that comes after a long wait in the dark when someone finally flips the switch. When we parted I didn't apologize. Neither did he. He just touched my cheek and said, "You never owed me anything." And I whispered, "I know." There was something sacred about the way Noah held the ring box. He wasn't flashy about it. No grand gestures, no camera-ready smile. Just a quiet reverence in the way his thumb brushed the lid, like it held something more than gold and engraving. Like it held a promise no one else got to witness. We stood side by side in the little boutique off Birch Avenue, tucked behind the florist and the used bookshop. The jeweler, a gentle woman with thick glasses and a hummingbird tattoo on her wrist, lifted the rings out of their velvet cradles and placed them on the tray between us. "You sure you don't want diamonds?" she asked for the third time, her tone hopeful. "I'm sure," I said. Noah nodded. "No stones. No sparkle. Just us." She smiled knowingly and stepped back, giving us space. I picked up the smaller band, matte gold with a soft inner curve. Inside it read, E+I. I turned to him. "Why this inscription again?" He tilted his head. "Because every story that lasted started with initials carved into something. A tree. A wall. A ring," I murmured, smiling. "And if we ever get lost," he said, sliding his own ring on, "we'll know who we were." I held my hand out. "Then help me remember." He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I stared at it for a beat too long. I'd worn jewelry before. Flashy things Mason gave me when he felt guilty, sparkly apologies. But none of them ever felt like this. This one felt like home. We left the shop hand in hand, walking slowly through the outdoor mall where sunlight fell in long gold slants across the marble tiles. There were kids tossing coins into fountains, couples sipping iced lattes on benches, and the smell of cinnamon sugar wafting from the pretzel kiosk near the escalator. Noah stopped and looked around. "Pretzel break." I grinned. "You read my mind." He bought one salted and one cinnamon. A compromise. We sat on a nearby bench, sharing bites and joking about who would finish theirs first. "Can't believe this place used to be a parking lot," I mused, licking sugar off my thumb. "You know what else I can't believe?" Noah said around a mouthful of pretzel. "That guy over there just tried to iron a shirt at a kiosk." I followed his gaze and burst into laughter. "That's a steamer. He's demonstrating it." "Still dangerous," he said, eyes twinkling. "Pretzels and public safety, that's our Saturday." I was mid-laugh when a voice, too sharp to ignore, cut through the air. "Well, isn't this cozy?" The words dropped like a cold coin in warm tea. I turned. "Maybe." And standing beside him, holding his arm with a smile so smug I could smell it from 6 feet away, Vanessa. Pregnant. Very obviously pregnant. Her designer coat hugged her swollen belly like a statement piece. Her heels clacked even when she wasn't moving. Her eyes. Direct. Calculated. But Mason's eyes were on my hand. On the ring. Matching Noah's. His lips curled in disbelief. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." I didn't answer. Just slowly lowered my hand. He stepped closer. "You married him?" "Not that it's your business," I said, voice calm, "but no. Engaged." His tone was sharper now. "Already." I didn't realize there was a minimum mourning period for escaping betrayal. Noah stood up slowly. "Ivy." "It's okay," I said, touching his arm gently. "I've got it." Mason's eyes flicked between us and his expression twisted. This is why you disappeared. Why you went off-grid. To shack up with the guy next door. No. I disappeared because the man I trusted chose lies over loyalty. And when I got sick, he chose silence over showing up. Vanessa scoffed beside him. She always did love dramatic exits. My gaze snapped to her, calm but cutting. And you always did love cleaning up what I left behind. Her nostrils flared, but I turned back to Mason. He was staring at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. That woman would have cried. But asked him why. I didn't. He took a sudden step forward and grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Not painful. But controlling. Like he still thought he had some claim. My heart didn't skip. I didn't panic. I just looked down at his fingers on my skin. Then I looked him in the eye. And slowly, deliberately, I peeled his hand off. One finger at a time. I'm not your maybe anymore. The gown was slate blue, silk, off-shoulder with a slit that dared but never begged. I had never worn anything like it before. Never needed to. But tonight wasn't about need. It was about message. The woman in the mirror wasn't the one who collapsed on a cold hallway floor while her fiancé gave someone else her ring. She wasn't the girl who stayed quiet so Mason could speak louder. She wasn't even the one who kept her wins small so she didn't threaten anyone's ego. Tonight I was the woman who stayed. And became everything they weren't prepared for. Noah appeared behind me in the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. Navy tux. No tie. A quiet kind of confidence that didn't ask for attention. It just drew it naturally. You ready? He asked. I took a breath. Let's ruin their appetite. The gala was held at the Crestmont, a historic downtown ballroom with gold leaf ceilings and velvet walls, where names whispered behind closed doors carried more weight than headlines. I stepped into the room on Noah's arm, head high, shoulders squared. It didn't take long. Eyes turned. Not because of Noah. Not because of the dress. Because I was the last person they expected to see, and the only one not playing a role. We moved through the crowd with ease, his hand warm on the small of my back. Everyone's staring, I murmured. They're probably wondering who finally got me out of my black sweaters and dusty lecture halls, he joked. I laughed, low and real. Then we should give them something to talk about. And right on cue we did. Across the ballroom, Vanessa stood flanked by socialites in champagne gowns. Her hair was pinned in a high, dramatic twist, and her pregnancy belly was showcased in a dress that screamed custom couture and second-hand pride. Her eyes met mine. Calculated. She smiled all teeth. Then she lifted her glass and said too loudly to be casual. Still clinging to rich men, huh? I didn't break stride. I simply smiled. You taught me well, how to look expensive and still feel cheap. The room went still around us, air sucked out by the weight of polite gasps behind wine flutes. Vanessa's mouth twitched, but I was already walking away. Noah leaned close. Do I even need to be here? You're the purse, I teased. You're here to look expensive. He grinned. That I can do. Mason found me near the silent auction table. Of course he did. He was wearing a designer suit he didn't earn and a face that had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. He looked thinner. Not in the gym way, in the restless, hollow way. Ivy. I didn't turn. He stepped closer. Can we talk? Now you want to talk? Yes. I finally looked at him. 5 years with me and you couldn't speak. Don't start now. He winced. I made mistakes. No, I said, you made choices. Repeatedly. Vanessa appeared behind him like a well-trained shadow. She grabbed his arm and hissed, he still dreams about you. I turned to her, my smile quiet but lethal. Then he should have stayed awake. Vanessa blinked, stunned for half a second, the only time I'd ever seen her uncomposed. Then she composed herself too fast, like a curtain slamming down mid-scene. Mason, on the other hand, just looked at me with something desperate in his expression. Not love. Not regret. Possession. Like he was trying to remember what it felt like to hold something that didn't belong to him anymore. Ivy, please, he murmured. This isn't you. I turned fully to face him. You're right. It's not. That Ivy would have folded. She would have asked what she did wrong. She would have cried in the bathroom and made excuses for your absence. I took a step closer. He stiffened. This Ivy. I said quietly, almost kindly. She's the one who got up and walked away and never looked back. His jaw clenched. Vanessa's grip on his arm tightened. But neither of them said another word. Because they didn't have any left. Noah found me again at the wine bar, offering me a glass of sparkling water with a lime wedge tucked on the rim. "I think I just witnessed a spiritual cleanse," he said. "Did I overdo it?" "No. That was art." He handed me the glass. "If you'd dropped the mic, someone might have cried." I sipped. "It's not about revenge anymore." "No." I shook my head. "It's about reclaiming the version of myself I buried to make other people comfortable." He smiled. "That version," I added, "isn't so polite anymore." He leaned in. "Then I'm definitely in love with her." My pulse did that quiet lurch it always did when he said things like that. Gently, casually, like he'd been waiting his whole life to speak without interruption. Later that evening, the lights dimmed and the ballroom quieted. Noah and I were called to the stage to present a major donation to a nonprofit we both cared about. One that supported women leaving abusive or controlling partnerships. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. As we stepped up to the mic, I felt 100 pairs of eyes watching. But for the first time I didn't shrink. I stood taller. Noah opened with a few words about growth, second chances, and unseen strength. The crowd applauded politely. Then I took the mic. And I looked right at Vanessa. Right at Mason. And said, "Some people feed off crumbs because they've never tasted a full meal. Some learn to settle because they think it's love. Some wear pretty dresses and expensive shoes, and still feel empty." I paused. Smiled. "I've done all three." A few stunned murmurs. Vanessa stiffened visibly. "But not anymore," I said. And as I handed the check over to the director of the nonprofit, I leaned into the mic one last time and said, "Enjoy the crumbs. I'm dining elsewhere." The wedding was televised. Not nationally, but to enough of the social circle that it might as well have been. Vanessa wore off-white. A compromise, she'd called it, since she'd already been 3 months pregnant. Mason wore a tailored suit that cost more than Ivy's rent back when they were together. And yet, as they stood at the altar of a rooftop hotel in Singapore, surrounded by city lights, chandeliers, and people who'd only shown up for the press photos, something gnawed inside him. Not regret. Not yet. But hollowness. Like he was standing in for someone who should have meant it more. The baby came early. A girl. Hazel eyes, dimpled cheeks. Vanessa insisted she looked like Mason. Everyone nodded even when they couldn't see it. Mason held her in the hospital nursery and whispered promises he didn't know how to keep. That he'd be better. That he'd try harder. That this would make him whole. But nights blurred. Vanessa became someone else. Always scrolling. Always posing. Her lips tight when the baby cried. Her eyes colder when the cameras weren't around. Mason worked longer hours. Tried to lose himself in contracts, conferences, things that looked like success. But the house grew quieter. The dinners shorter. The space between them colder. Till he stayed. He told himself it was loyalty. Maybe it was fear. The emergency came suddenly. A high fever, convulsions. The child was 4 by then. They rushed to the hospital. Vanessa cried in front of nurses. Mason signed forms with trembling hands. The doctor approached after the tests. "We need a full parental panel," he said gently, "to rule out inherited conditions." Mason nodded. He didn't even flinch. Until the doctor returned hours later holding the chart like a secret. "I'm sorry, Mr. Grayson," he said. "You're not listed as a biological match. Would you like us to repeat the test?" Mason didn't speak. Not then. Not for hours. The apartment was quiet when they returned. Vanessa tried to play it off, claimed she'd been confused, young, scared when she got pregnant. "It didn't matter," she said, folding her arms like she still had leverage. "You loved her. That's what counts, right?" But something inside Mason broke. Quietly. Irrevocably. He filed for divorce that week. She left with the handbags. He kept the silence. Months passed. He quit his job. Moved out of the apartment. Tried to breathe. But every corner of his life reeked of pretense. Of the version of himself he'd sold for status. And then one morning while sorting through an old box he found it. A photograph. Faded. Torn at the corner. It was Ivy, maybe 19, standing in front of a red brick orphanage with peeling paint and a crooked sign. He remembered. She'd once asked him to visit it with her. He hadn't gone. Too busy, he'd said at the time. But now all he had was time. He stood outside the orphanage gate. Looked the same. Red bricks stained from years of monsoon rains. A hand-painted sign still crooked above the door. St. Teresa's home. Children's laughter echoed from the back. A few faces peeked from dusty windows, wide-eyed and curious. Mason didn't step in. He just stared. The photo was still in his jacket pocket. Ivy smiling at the camera, hair wind-blown, eyes alive with something he hadn't understood back then. Pride. This place had shaped her. Given her strength. Made her her. And he had never bothered to learn that part. He had touched her body, shared her bed, spoken vows he thought were love. But he'd never seen her. Not really. Some nights Mason dreamed of her. Not the Ivy who cried at his silences. But the Ivy from the gala. Radiant. Untouchable. He dreamed of her laughing. Not with him. With someone else. He never saw the man's face, but he knew it wasn't him. Mason stood in the middle of the street for a long time after that. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just breathed. And for the first time in years it echoed back. Some people dream of grand cathedrals. I dreamed of peeling paint and rusted swings. Of a courtyard that smelled faintly of old chalk and wild jasmine. Of a place where promises were whispered through chain-link fences and tiny hands clutched crayons instead of certainty. I dreamed of the orphanage where I met Noah. And today we were getting married there. Quietly. Deliberately. Just us. And the two people who had witnessed who we were before the world asked us to be more. "You're late," I called, peeking out the crooked window of the tiny old staff room. Noah grinned from the yard where he was fiddling with string lights that kept drooping between two wobbly trees. "Technically I'm early. You're just impatient." I narrowed my eyes. "If those lights fall during our vows, I swear I'll make you repropose under a fire hazard." "Worth it," he said, squinting into the sun. "Because you're the prettiest fire hazard I've ever seen." I laughed. "You're lucky your face is still symmetrical." The director of the orphanage, Ms. Whitmore, now a sprightly 81 and still sharper than any spreadsheet, stood nearby holding a bouquet of mismatched garden flowers. Noah's housekeeper, Mrs. Gaines, dabbed her eyes with a tissue already soaked through. "I told him," she sniffled. "I told him she was the one. Even back when she used to yell at him for stealing chalk." "I didn't yell," I muttered. "I lectured." Noah winked. "Same energy. Less volume." My dress was simple, ivory, off-shoulder with tiny embroidered vines along the hem. I had designed it myself in the quiet months, after Noah helped me lease the little studio downtown. It was the first dress I'd ever made for myself. And for the first time I felt like I wasn't trying to fit into anything. Not expectations. Not someone's idea of a perfect bride. Just me. We stood beneath the old oak tree. The same one we used to hide under as kids, back when our worries were about homework and snack theft, not heartbreak and betrayal. Ms. Whitmore cleared her throat. "Do you, Ivy Morgan, promise not to murder this man for his weak tea brewing skills?" I smirked. "Only if he promises to stop singing in the shower." "I do," Noah said, grinning. "And do you, Noah Jensen, promise to always look at her like you are right now?" His eyes softened. "Every day. And every version of her." Noah took my hand as Ms. Whitmore gave us a knowing nod. "Ivy," he began, voice steady, "you were always my compass. Even when I was too scared to follow you." My eyes stung. "You never owed me anything," he continued. "But still you gave me kindness, honesty, space, and somehow, you're forever." I smiled through it. "You never asked me to be less." His voice caught. "You made space for me where there was only fire." Mrs. Gaines burst into a fresh wave of quiet sobs. Ms. Whitmore whispered, "Well done, kid," under her breath. We slipped the rings on. Silver bands with tiny engraved constellations. A reminder of the nights we dreamed about more under the orphanage sky. Afterward we didn't throw rice or cut a tiered cake. We shared a bowl of mangoes, giggled like children and danced barefoot on the cracked stone courtyard. The radio balanced on the windowsill played static-filled jazz. Noah twirled me until I nearly toppled. "Do you know," I said breathlessly, "that the first time I saw you, you were wearing mismatched socks and hoarding jelly beans?" He smirked. "And you still fell for me?" I didn't say I had taste. He kissed my temple. "But you do now." Later that month, I opened the doors to Hemline's studio. A sunlit space with wood floors, open shelves, a workbench worn with ink marks, and a corner desk where I sketched with my feet curled under me. My first collection. Soft, strong lines. No corsets. Nothing that begged to be liked. Just pieces meant to feel like home. Noah handled the business filings. Spoke to tailors when I got tongue-tied. Organized every scribbled note into a spreadsheet. All without asking for credit. When my first client arrived, a teenage girl who wanted a prom dress that didn't make her feel like a costume, Noah stayed late to sweep the floors. "You good?" he asked after she left. "I don't want to be famous," I said. He smiled. "You just want to be real." That night we returned to the orphanage hill. Just the two of us. A lantern in each hand, ready to send them into the night sky. I leaned against him. The air smelled like grass, ink and jasmine, all the things I'd built myself out of. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." We lit the lanterns and let them go. They lifted slowly, then floated upward, two soft golden orbs against the dark. I turned to him. His eyes held that look, quiet and infinite. "You've always been my forever," he whispered. I smiled. "And you were always the boy who stayed." The end.